Some events don't really require an introduction, but we'll try anyway. It's the caravan, the prologue, and the Grand Depart. It's across the flat, the cobbles, the gravel, and the road. You're up and then you're down, Alpe d'Huez, Mont Ventoux, and the Col de Tourmalet. It's 3 weeks in the Champs-Élysées. It's crosswinds, rain, and sunshine. It's sprints, breakaways, climbs, mountaintop finishes, and time trials. You're in white, you're in green, you're in polka dot, and you're in yellow. It's the cut-off and the lantern rouge. Domestiques, lead-out men, support cars, and spare parts. It's spirit, endurance, and an unconquerable body and mind. It's also drawing pins on the route, cups of urine in the face, mass crashes, and neutralised races. It used to be alcohol, cocaine, and chloroform. Sometimes it was amphetamine. Then it was EPO, human growth hormone, and testosterone. Scandals and death. Whether you love it or hate it, trust it or suspicious of it, you can't take your eyes off it. Get ready for another edition of the Tour de France. This is the Sporting Almanac Podcast.
Good evening, Ben.
Evening, mate.
How are you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm better for it having cooled down. How are you?
If it stays this temperature forever, I'll be quite happy.
What do you think the temperature is in France?
That's a very good question. Probably warmer than here, but I bet they complain about it less than us.
Yeah, that's true. Doesn't put them off their bicycle riding.
No, imagine having a bicycle ride designed to be as tough a test as the human body can manage, and then thinking, I'm going to stick this in July as well, in one of the warmer countries of Europe, heading all the way down to the Mediterranean.
Yeah. Routinely along the south coast, and then a mountain range either side. Well, that is what we're talking about. If anyone hasn't cottoned on from the intro and our flirtatious comments,
An incredible amount of jargon in that intro. I loved it.
Yes, there was. That is the Tour de France, which is obviously what we are covering.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's something that in the United Kingdom we were very, very bad at for a very long time, between the 1960s and the 90s to a certain extent, but mainly the 2000s and especially the 2010s. We were almost a laughingstock of it, and then suddenly got good, and I fell completely in love with it because of that. 2011 Cavendish, 2012 Wiggins, 2013 Froome, 2015, 2016, 2017 Froome, 2018 Thomas.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff.
Yeah, there's a direct correlation between how seriously we started taking the Olympics and therefore track cycling, and then the emergence of a successful road cycling team about 15 years after the fact. Because 92 is when Barcelona 92, when Boardman won a gold in the track cycling, was sort of when it started to get some domestic interest, but it still took a little while. And then it was sort of 2008 and the medal factory that was Beijing.
Brailsford.
And Brailsford, exactly. And it's from there, really, that it just translated into the road. Obviously, Cav was gone in and around that period on the road already, but its general popularity and therefore our success in the generals classification, which nobody gave a shit about, firstly, for a long time here. And secondly,
we didn't for good reason.
Yeah, and we didn't produce any, well, yes, we'll come to that, but also we didn't produce anybody that was really, there were people occasionally, some of whom we'll touch on, one very famous incident and individual in particular, but yeah, we didn't really produce anyone, and the people that we did produce weren't, the mainstay of the British public, so...
Team leaders, yeah.
Yeah, and they weren't household names or anything, so it's the Olympics, the funding for cycling as an Olympic sport, I think, and then the innovation of, a couple of individuals that have seen it explode over here. But we are now very good at it. Many Grand Tour winners.
Having just won another Grand Tour.
Yeah, the Yates brothers are both very good. But so I guess, yeah, well, I mean, we've just done a little bit about Britain and the Tour de France by accident, but we haven't introduced the event itself, the Billy Basics, for those that aren't as universal enthusiasts about sport as us and therefore may not be that familiar with the setup.
Indeed.
Shall I run us through it?
Yeah, you run us through it, but what I'm going to say is anytime we come across some jargon that needs explaining, we may pause and explain the jargon as we go, rather than doing a big long list now.
Yeah.
But we appreciate, as you heard from the intro, we appreciate there is quite a lot of jargon in this sport, and anyone who is unfamiliar with it may not know their pelotons from their domestiques, from their echelons, from their puncheurs, from the rest.
And we're not going to do a verbal index because it's a bit weird, as you say, so we'll do it as we go. Okay, modern editions of the Tour de France consist of effectively a 21-day long series of stages over 23 or 24 days, a couple of rest days in the middle, basically. And it covers a distance of about 3,500 kilometres or 2,200 miles. So it's long. And weirdly, it alternates between a clockwise and counterclockwise circuit each year. The route changes every year, so no route is ever the same, but there are multiple locations that are featured regularly. And the race is just an aggregate of your times across all the different stages to the end. And the final stage is in Paris, traditionally finishing on the Champs-Élysées. It didn't always used to be like this, but it is now effectively a ceremonial stage, so nobody challenges the leader on the final stage. They just ride together into Paris. It's a very, very famous bunch sprint finish on the Champs-Élysées every time. And yeah, there are 20 to 23 teams of 8 riders, usually. It varies year on year, which means there's approximately 160 to 184 riders at the start. Most do finish, but quite a lot drop out as it goes, some deliberately so.
Yes, I was going to say some by design.
Yeah, in order to sort of assist their teammates at particularly difficult stages and what have you. They sort of drain all their energy at a particular point in the race. And they ride traditionally, and here comes our first bit of jargon, in a peloton.
Yeah, so the peloton is a name for basically the main group of riders within a stage is called the peloton. So wherever the biggest group of riders riding together, because they all like to ride nice and tight, because if you're riding at the front, you're encountering a lot of wind resistance, but if you're in the middle of a nice bunch of riders, that is obviously minimised. Crosswinds as well can make a difference. Now, the word peloton, it also refers to the group as a whole outside of races. So if you're not talking about a race context and you hear peloton, it means the group of riders. If it's within a stage, it means the main group within that stage. Simple, yeah, simple jargon.
Very simple, yeah. And here we go, a bit more. Let's keep introducing stuff. Teams are comprised of effectively a leader and then a series of domestiques. Your leader is pretty self-explanatory, but they can be a leader for the general classification, so trying to win the overall race, or they can be a leader because they are trying to win particular stages, or they also might be a leader because they... Well, no, in actual fact, those are the two. Those are the two things, really. But when I say two types of stage leaders, you have those going for bunch sprints and those going for mountaintop finishes and or breakaways in certain circumstances if the team isn't particularly prestigious. But they are supported, those leaders are supported by people known as domestiques. So, Jack, what is a domestique?
Domestique is... The word domestique is the French word for servant, which I think tells you everything you need to know. It's a rider whose job is to support the team leader, not to win themselves. They fetch water bottles, they shelter teammates from the wind, they chase down breakaways, they set the pace on climbs, they even give up their own bike if needed. Mm-hmm. They're the unsung heroes, sacrificing personal glory so their team's star can shine. But occasionally you also get what is known as super domestiques, and they are the people who, if it wasn't for the team leader, probably could be the team leader themselves, but they will be the ones who are leading that team leader up the hardest stages, by his side, protecting him in the difficult times from start to finish in the race. They are your guys who, they might be next year's team leader perhaps, or team leader of the future, but for now they are talented, supporting cast members.
Most famously, in a British context, Froome and Wiggins 2012.
Yes, Chris Froome was the ultimate super domestique who went on to win 4 out of the next 5 Tour de France's himself.
Yeah. And there's a very famous clip from one of the stages towards the end of the tour, the back end of the tour, on a mountain stage where Froome is leading Wiggins up the mountain and then deliberately, some say, dropped him temporarily, only to then allow him to catch up as a message to the cycling world. That was a big fuck you, I could beat you if I wanted, but I'm doing as I'm told. But yeah, obviously it's, whether or not it was that cynical, I don't know.
It worked out okay for him in the end.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean that's the general overview of it. I mean, it starts with the Grand Depart. Doesn't always start in France.
No.
Do you want to have a guess where it has started?
It started in Yorkshire before.
It has started in the United Kingdom before. That's true.
Started in Kent as well.
Yes,
I believe
in the UK a few times, but
But
yeah.
yes, in the UK, yes. It started Italy. It started in Switzerland.
Indeed.
The Netherlands, I'm guessing.
It has started in the
Spain.
Netherlands. Spain, yes.
Belgium.
Belgium is the most times. It has been outside of France 50 times.
Germany?
Switzerland second. Germany, yes, 12 times. Started in Germany. Luxembourg's in there as well, weirdly. And then a couple of more niche ones, which I would have not...
Ireland.
Yes, Ireland is correct. Denmark is a recent one, which was kind of fun. But the three particularly niche places, which completes the list because you've got the others, are Andorra, Monaco, and weirdly San Marino.
Fair enough. Ireland, 1998, am I right in saying?
Oh,
Have you got the list in front of you?
I haven't got the list in front of me, but if it was, that is a tasty year to have hosted the Grand Depart.
Well, that's why I know it, because I think there was a certain amount of questions that wanted to be asked, and some of the riders had time to come up with some good stories because they weren't in France at the time.
Very interesting.
We'll come to that.
Yeah, also the nation of our favourite journalist in cycling circles.
Indeed.
Should we quickly then cover the breakdown of the races?
Yes.
The races within the race, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not complicated.
Yeah, it isn't complicated if we take it slow. So, the yellow jersey, the most famous symbol of this race, is awarded to the overall leader at any given point. So they're riding in the yellow jersey, so you can identify who the leader is. And then they keep the yellow jersey, they win the yellow jersey if they finish first overall. That is called the general classification, and as I mentioned earlier, it is just your aggregated time across all 21 stages. Fairly straightforward. Most people are familiar with the yellow jersey winners, colloquially at least. You've probably heard of Lance Armstrong. We'll come to him.
I thought we were talking about yellow jersey winners, Ben.
Bradley Wiggins, Chris Froome, Geraint Thomas at home. These are the guys that wore the yellow jersey. Other than Lance Armstrong, I'm not actually sure that the armchair fan who's not into cycling will know many of the others.
No, probably not.
But there are plenty of people in cycling circles.
Yeah, I'm sure people from certain countries will know their own representatives, just like we know the British riders. But
yeah, I mean, the greatest ever is Merckx. The French would say Bernard Hinault. The Spanish would say Miguel Indurain. Maybe Contador, but he's, asterisk again.
Yeah.
Italians, Nibali recently. We should probably throw a bone to our Slovenian brothers and sisters, because they've got the current champ, the reigning champ, whose surname and first name I struggle to pronounce, is Podkar. Is that how you pronounce it?
I'm letting you do it. It sounds close enough to me.
Podkar.
Better than I could do.
Yeah, and Vingegaard from, I want to say he's Danish.
Sounds like.
He's also won a few recently. When those two are responsible for the last 5. So those are the guys that are competing for the yellow jersey, and they will be the 2 guys probably this year as well going for it, up against each other for a 6th year in a row. Then you have the points classification, which is traditionally for the sprinters, but not exclusively. So you get some hybrid racers like Sagan, for example, who could do a bit of everything and therefore could pick up more points, but was also a gun sprinter. Basically what it means is if you win sprints and or intermediate sprints, and like I said, to a lesser extent, certain breakaway points, like certain climbs, that sort of thing, then you get points which are just effectively a league table. And if you're leading that table, you wear the green jersey. And then if you finish the tour with the most points from stages that assign those, that award points for the particular wins or finishes, then you win the green jersey. That is what Mark Cavendish is very famous for having won.
Yeah. So they're basically mini races within the race itself, essentially. So for small amounts of points within the race itself, you'll have a series of whoever gets to this line first gets some points, and then to end the race, you will get many more points, especially as a sprint finish race. You'll get a lot of points for winning the stage as well. So those all accumulate, and at the end of that, someone gets a green jersey, as Mark Cavendish did in 2011.
Yes, and it's heavily weighted in favour of stage win. You are far more likely to win the green jersey if you are winning stages. A lot of people's favourite jersey is the polka dot jersey, red and white.
Aesthetically, certainly.
Yeah, that is the mountains classification, and it's for the climbers, mountaintop finishes and intermediate climbs. Exactly the same principle as the green jersey, but for mountains. Can you get to the top first? So on and so forth. Can you win the mountain stages? If you can, you'll be in the polka dot. Those are the three main ones. They're the big dogs. But you also have the white jersey, which is the young rider classification for the best rider under the age of 26. It's the same as the general classification.
So if a rider under the age of 26 was in yellow, he would also be in white at that point, although he wouldn't wear the white jersey, obviously.
No.
I think the person in second wears the white jersey in that case, or do they not have one?
I think they might wear it, but they don't get it.
Yes.
So, yeah, but you see this quite often, actually. Like, sometimes one person will have more than one jersey. So if it's a particularly mountainous year on the route, then often the yellow jersey might be competing or in the polka dot.
Maybe not competing, maybe almost winning it by accident.
Yeah, kind of winning it by accident. Not actually trying to win it.
Because they're getting a ton of points for those mountaintop finishers for winning the stages.
Indeed. And then you also have a team classification, which is based on the first three finishers from each team on each stage. And again, it's a point-based aggregated system across the entire race. And then you also have an award, which is for the most combative rider, which I think is really fun.
It's cool.
Just encourages...
a nice subjective award.
Yeah, it just encourages people to attack on breakaways and on mountain stages, I think. There is actually a commercial benefit to that. Screen time, sponsorships, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the more joyful awards that the Tour throws up. The last thing to mention is those are your overall competitions within the main event, but you also have stage winners, and you know this, Jack. But to win each stage is an individual race in its own right, and as I said before, they could be fairly flat stages that encourage breakaways, a little bit hilly, not completely flat. You can break away through the hills, and then you can charge off to victory. Sprints where it's completely flat and the teams work to help someone get to the end and then out sprint everybody. Time trials, which is self-explanatory. Everyone rides on their own as fast as they can. Fastest rider wins. And then mountaintop finishes, as so obviously people climbing. If you can win a stage, it's a big deal. Particularly for smaller teams, but just in general terms, like reputationally and stuff, people who've won stages in the Tour de France, you sort of cement yourself as at least an elite level rider to be taken very seriously.
Are you just teeing yourself up to talk about your favourite rider in the history of the Tour de France right now?
No.
So Ben, tell me, who's won the most stages in the Tour de France?
That is one Manx Missile. Yeah, Mark Cavendish, who is my favourite rider from the Tour. You are right. He's got an incredible record, considering he's done it as a sprinter and everybody else near him is not a sprinter, are all general classification riders. Yeah, Cavendish has 35. The legendary Eddie Merckx has 34, one back. Bernard Hinault has 28. And then there's a fairly big gap thereafter in sort of like mid to low 20s. But if you want to know how good Cavendish is, when it comes to mass finishes only on stages, Cavendish, all of his are mass finishes, 35. Second best is Andre Darrigard and Andre Leduc with 22. And Francois Faber,
a fair distance,
has 19 and Eddie Merckx 18. The thing to look out for, though, if you're interested in these stats, mate, 'cause I'm just throwing them at you here, because you threw me a bone on Cavendish and off I go. Interestingly, Pogacar has 17 stage wins from 5 years and 3 Tour victories, and he's only 26. So he's in the mix to get right up there. Whether he'll go past Cavendish is obviously a tall order, but he's halfway there.
Yeah, well, Cavendish was most of the way to that 35 by the time he was, maybe not 26, but certainly before he was 30, so every chance he flattens out a bit as he gets older.
Well, it's also a brutal sport. You only need one accident, like Froome, Egan Bernal. There's lots of examples of people just having major crashes, and then it screws you.
It's also Yeah, it's also once you've worn it a few times, having the mental fortitude to carry on, putting the effort in,
Yeah.
time away from your family, the unbelievable pain that you have to go through every year. So maybe he's got it. We'll see.
Yeah.
35 is a tall order.
35 is a tall order. But yeah, I mean, there's lots to talk about. Like that, we've sort of introduced the race itself, but I mean, there is an elephant in the room, Jack, and I wonder if we just grasp the nettle to keep using metaphors.
What could you possibly be talking about, Ben?
This is the one event above all events, and I'm including athletics in this, including boxing in this, that has a relationship with doping like no other.
Yeah. It's completely endemic to it. Like it's probably, in terms of cheating, if we call it cheating rather than call it doping, it's genuinely, it would be more likely to say every single winner has cheated in some way than it would to say less than half have. I think you're probably closer to the truth to say they all have, because if you go back in, the one caveat for that would be, prior to the 1960s, a lot of drugs simply weren't banned in cycling, so you could legally take a lot of drugs. So technically they weren't cheating by doing it then, but they were all on something at that point. Since then, the majority have been either caught or have been accused of taking drugs at some point, and many have obviously been outright caught, and one in particular has had an awful lot of titles taken away from him.
Yeah, it's insane. When you actually dig into the overall picture, there are probably more people that have won the Tour de France that have at least been affiliated to doping than have not been. That average is probably being evened out ever so slightly by recent times, because you kind of have to go back to the Wiggins 2012 Jiffy Bag saga to get anything that's really close to a scandal on the scale that the Tour is familiar with and used to. After Wiggins, you've basically had Chris Froome.
There's been plenty of accusations levelled at him, but nothing particularly concrete.
Yeah, Chris Froome, Geraint Thomas, Egan Bernal, and then Pogacar and Vingegaard are the only winners since then. So I mean, only a few people. And you had Nibali just before, like in between as well. Sorry, and Cadel Evans and Andy Schleck also won, but in 2010 and 11 respectively. But after that, going back in time, like 2010s, sorry, not 2000s, and then the 90s, and then further back in time, it just gets progressively worse.
I mean, take us through some of the numbers involved, the details. Like before 1999, which we all know about, that's the first year Lance Armstrong won it, for anyone who isn't aware.
Yeah, what, you want to know? You want to know the people? So Marco Pantani won in 1998. Festina Saga, we'll get to that. He's clearly was almost certainly doping. Jan Ulrich, 97, has admitted doping. 96, Bjorn Ries, I think he's admitted doping.
Yes, he has.
Miguel Indurain then won it 5 years in a row, and he was part of the Benesto team, which Indurain himself, don't think, he failed a test in 94 for salbutamol following Tour de l'Oise in France. Just another name in the long list of professional athletes with asthma. Salbutamol being, not that big a deal, but modern testing sort of undermines the significance of its performance enhancing attributes, I think. But nonetheless, he did fail a test in May 94. He hadn't tested positive, but the Benesto team were clients of Dr. Francesco Conconi, who was later found to be doping many of his cycling clients. So there's been a lot of association and no proof.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I can keep going back, mate, if you want me to. I mean, there's just loads of it. You had Greg LeMond thrown in there. Bernard Hinault, probably one of the few that comes out looking better than most. Never tested positive.
Greg LeMond as well, to be fair.
Yes. Sorry, I skipped over Greg LeMond. He's a 3-time winner, which was remiss of me. He's spoken a lot about anti-doping, hasn't he? Criticised Armstrong and Landis and Contador. He actually criticised Contador before Contador got busted as well. Also criticised Pat McQuaid and the UCI, and basically sort of like a outspoken voice. I don't know if he's whiter than white, but yeah.
Well, this is it. I mean, the sort of levels to it as well. when you talk about the 1980s and 1990s and EPO coming in, like I can say with confidence from what I've read about Greg LeMond, he never went anywhere near that, whereas a lot of his fellow riders were. So whether or not there wasn't some cortisone thrown in or something like that to keep him going during races, it's not quite the same level. As I say, there's levels to it.
Yeah, and I'd say this is where Bernard Hinault is like not dissimilar to LeMond, although he's probably like less of a poster boy in that regard, though, because he never tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs in his professional career, and he's never been implicated in any doping practices either. So you're sort of thinking, hallelujah, but not really, because he did lead a riders' protest during the Criterium race in Calac in 1982 against the introduction of doping control. He's also been outspoken
There's
about...
a long history of that.
Yeah, I know, it's odd, isn't it? He's also been outspoken about several prominent doping cases in the past and like criticised French senators for revealing the test results conducted in 2004 on samples from the 1998 tour, which is a bold stance to take, given the 1998 tour was a shambles.
Yeah, given the biggest team in cycling at the time basically got caught with their pants down.
Yeah,
in that race,
and it led to people getting arrested
unequivocally
and stuff. But yeah, he called that initiative bullshit and urged lawmakers to stop bringing out the dead, claiming they wanted to kill the tour. So yeah, a pretty for a guy that's like anti-doping, that's a pretty strong stance. However, in the interests of balance, he has criticised Armstrong and Froome even for their
low-lying fruit in Armstrong's case.
Yeah. I think he had a little pop at Froome about the salbutamol stuff, although Froome's case was dropped by the UCI. But I think he just sort of said it cast a shadow over his successes, which is a bit unfair because it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if the case gets dropped, and you do have a therapeutic use exemption, and it is for salbutamol, which everyone seems to take, like I say, because everyone has asthma. I'm not sure you can say it casts a shadow over your achievements in the way that EPO does.
No. Well, again, like I say, there's levels to it, but I mean, ultimately it was legal. I think you can criticise the fact it was legal, but as long as it's legal, an elite team, especially a team well renowned for trying to find marginal gains in everything it does, it's going to take advantage of legalities. And there we are.
I mean, it doesn't even stop there, though, mate. I'm taking us back, and then you're going to bring us back through this era.
Take me back to the beginning, and I'll take you back forward.
Yeah, that's what I'm planning on doing. So then you go back, and you get to Merckx, and like Merckx is a super interesting guy, and like possibly the greatest cyclist that's ever lived.
Yeah,
but he tested positive on stage 16 of the Giro in '69 for phencamphetamine and an amphetamine, 2 stimulants basically. And that was the only time he tested positive in a Grand Tour, and he's always protested his innocence, saying that he was effectively stitched up because they wanted I think it's because they wanted his allegation is one of conspiracy, of course, that like the Italians wanted an Italian winner or something like that. I can't remember. But
well, yeah. I mean, the Italians are very passionate about certain sports, one of which being cycling.
Oh, mate.
Famously
I'm not putting it past.
I was going to say, famously in 1948, a civil war in Italy was basically resolved by an Italian dude winning the Tour de France. That's how much Italy cares about cycling in the Tour de France particularly.
So it's not beyond the realms of possibility is what you're trying to tell me?
I would say it's not, but nevertheless.
And that would be great.
We love a conspiracy theory.
And that, yeah, we do. And that would be lovely, and I'd be more inclined to buy in if he hadn't tested positive in 73 for norepinephrine.
Stop bringing facts into my conspiracy theory party.
However, again, maybe another little asterisk is in this instance that it's a decongestant that's no longer banned. But that was after the Giro di Lombardy. Merckx accepted that he had taken that actually, but said it was mistakenly taken through a cough medicine which hadn't put it on the label. Again, fine. But in 1977, Merckx, along with several other riders, tested positive for a stimulant, pemeline, at the La Flèche Wallonne in Belgium. And this time he blamed his doctor. So... Yeah.
It's always someone else's fault.
Always someone else's fault. Yeah. So it's very... I mean, that's a reoccurring theme as well, isn't it?
Yeah, really is.
So, I mean... Oh, God. I mean, there are loads of them. Like, You then get to Jacques Anquetil. He's a 5-time winner. He's never hid the fact he doped. In fact, he's on record as saying, "Leave me in peace. Everybody takes dope."
Who was that, sorry?
That was Jacques Anquetil.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a good quote from him. He said, "You can't win the Tour on mineral water alone. Everybody dopes."
Yeah. Yeah.
But it wasn't illegal. At that point, it wasn't illegal. This was the early 1960s. It didn't become illegal until 1965 on the back of... I can keep going back and I'll bring you forward again.
Yeah,
You tell me what you want to hand over to me.
Where have I got to now? Got to Antilles.
60s.
So, Bobet, okay, 3-time winner. Louis Bobet, what did he have to say for himself? So, he never tested positive and publicly denied his involvement in doping. But he was a big admirer of Fausto Coppi, who was famed for his, in inverted commas, modern methods, which are widely accepted to have basically just been drugs. And then Bobet hired a physiotherapist who was affiliated with and met Coppi, who was said to have presented a suitcase full of drugs to him. He denied having taken any. This all sounds great, and maybe you could be forgiven for thinking, Jack, that right now that I'm sort of trying to drag Mr. Bobet into it. Except a journalist was once at a dinner of previous Tour de France winners and overheard Merckx, Anquetil and Bobet joking about how Bobet took substances that were provided to him by his team that he didn't know the contents of, and they were all joking about.
Sounds like hearsay to me, Ben. Objection.
I know. And then Coppi himself, well, I've already mentioned him. Yeah, he fucking loves the drugs.
I've got a good story about him as well.
Go on.
Another Italian. You know, I just said 1948, a civil war was avoided. There was a rider called Gino Bartali who won that. He and Fausto Coppi, as you just said, loathed each other. Their rivalry split Italy in two, and they both ended up on the same team, or the Italian team, and had to ride together. They refused to do so, and it caused such a stir in Italy. The Italian state railway workers went on strike because of it, and the Pope had to personally intervene to find a solution between them. So there you go. Italians.
That is mad. So maybe they did spike Merckx, is what you're saying.
You know what? Wouldn't want to accuse a whole country.
Oh, mate. I think, I've got us back to, because Coppi was just after the war, 49.
Yeah.
It was his first win. So I've got us back there. The only two people I haven't mentioned are Bernard Thévenet, who's a 2-time winner, and Laurent Fignon, who's also a 2-time winner. So just to complete this picture of multiple winners, because there is an undertone to all of this. Thévenet was caught taking drugs in the 1977 Paris-Nice race, and later just admitted, I was doping by cortisone for 3 years, and most people were. And then Fignon tested positive for amphetamines at the Grand Prix de Wallonie in 1987. Said he was done over by a commercial dispute between two companies, so presumably the smited company he's alleging probably spiked him or what have you. Which is, we've heard that one already in this conversation.
Was it an Italian company?
No, I think Belgium.
Okay. Probably innocent then.
Yeah, but that would be... Mate, that would be a good excuse, except he tested positive for amphetamines a second time at the Grand Prix deliberation.
You are no fun. Honestly, you're ruining all these conspiracy theories.
In 1989, he then changed his tune amid he took drugs, but they didn't really enhance performance. Which begs the question, Jack, why are you taking them then?
So is that all the multiple winners you've just brought up there?
Oh, yeah. Jesus Christ, mate. What it basically means is that...
And bear in mind, you've not mentioned Lance Armstrong because he was disqualified.
I've not mentioned Lance. I've flirted with Chris Froome, who's a 4-time winner. And I haven't mentioned Contador, but Contador was heavily implicated in Operation Puerto, which is a doping case. So that sort of completes the picture. Contador ends up doing 2 years because he was obviously doping. And so what this all...
That's banned, not in prison, I should say. You make it sound like he's locked up for that.
Well, if he'd done it in France, if he got caught in France, he might have been.
Yeah.
So anyway, what that means is that there've been 22 multiple winners. Okay? 1903 to 1940s, you've already mentioned, doping was acceptable. So
and again, that's not including Lance Armstrong.
Yeah, I think that doesn't include Armstrong, but he accounts for one person. This is still pretty astonishing. So 1903 to 1940s, doping was acceptable. 1903 being the first tour. 1940s, obviously, everyone can probably infer World War II. That accounts for 9 of the 22 multiple winners. They were all doping, those 9. So that leaves you with, how many's left? 13. Of those 13, 9 have tested positive or been implicated in doping. Hinault and Froome are obviously the ones that you would probably give the benefit of the doubt to, based on the information that's to hand. And then since then, it's just Vingegaard and Pogačar who are the 2 winners of the past 5 tours, and Greg LeMond. That's it.
Yeah. Greg LeMond's looking very good out of that.
Yeah, well, that's probably the reason why people cut him some slack for his off-white appearance.
I mean,
his cream,
it's all relative, isn't it?
His cream is beige.
Compare him to the company he's keeping.
Yeah. So anyway, so what I basically said, I've set the scene for you, mate. I've taken us all the way back, post-war. Everyone's doping. Tell me how it came about.
The origin story. You want me to go all the way back? Because the first line of this is, in 1894.
How do you get doping in 1894?
No, this is not doping. I'm just talking about the Tour de France.
Oh, you want to start with just the Tour de France? Okay.
Well,
okay.
I mean, yeah, we love an origin story. We've got to get it in.
We do. Okay. Tell us, yeah.
No, I'm not going to promise there's not going to be a lot of mentions to drugs and cheating of various types in this. Anyway, the Tour de France, how did it come about? I mean, it came about due to some proper French history. For those of you who know their French history, you'll have heard of the Dreyfus Affair. In 1894, Captain Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish artillery officer from Alsace, was wrongly convicted of treason and accused of passing secrets to the Germans, as you do. Basically, due to his religion, because he was Jewish. So there was a heck of a lot of anti-Semitism involved. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on Devil's Island, a mosquito-infested hellhole off French Guiana. He languished for 5 years in brutal conditions there. In 1896, a counter-espionage chief, Georges Picard, discovered the real spy was actually a man called Ferdinand Walsin Esterhazy. Basically, the army brass covered it up to avoid a scandal, and probably with a big dose of anti-Semitism too. Eventually, he was pardoned by the president, having been convicted again in basically a show trial, and then he was eventually fully exonerated in 1906. But in the meantime, it split France politically. Essentially, those who were progressive of the left, you would say, were in his favour, and those who were conservative of the right, including sort of big industrialists and that sort of type, were against him, as it would be today, as it would be for any time in history. So it split France in two, as I say, and how it's relevant to this story is the leading French newspaper of the day was Le Vélo, which mixed sports reporting with politics and was considered a progressive newspaper for the day. It often used sports events as a promotional tool, so it can be credited with the creation of a couple of events, one of which is still going on, the Paris-Roubaix and the Bordeaux-Paris cycle races in the 1890s. The Bordeaux-Paris, it doesn't go on anymore, but that used to be a very long distance race. I think it was something like 350, maybe 400 kilometres in a day, something like that. So it was a very long distance, one-day race, but stopped doing that in the 80s. Obviously, Paris-Roubaix, still a big deal. So, being a progressive paper, Le Vélo took the side of Dreyfus in the affair, which, modernised would say probably the correct side to take. However, the largely conservative industrialists that were backing and advertising in Le Vélo didn't take kindly to this position. They withdrew from the newspaper and they set up a rival newspaper, L'Auto Vélo. For a while, these two newspapers competed side by side, the green-tinged Le Vélo initially outselling the yellow-tinged L'Auto Vélo. The newer paper was already floundering, and in 1903 suffered another blow when it was forced to drop the Vélo from its name. It feared that would cause a loss of cycling fans. Vélo obviously is the French word for cycling, and it needed something to both retain those fans and also to boost its sales. So, enter Gio Lefebvre. Gio Lefebvre suggested to editor Henri Destrange that a race around France was a good idea, inspired by 6-day track cycling events where riders tried to cover the most distance over 6 days. The idea was proposed and approved, and the first race was announced in L'Auto. The original plan was for a 5-week race, which was mad, and unsurprisingly, this was cancelled after only receiving a small handful of entries. I think about 15 people entered it.
Who has the time to go out cycling for 5 weeks?
Well, 15 were brave enough. But it was reduced to 3 weeks, and the prize money was increased as well. And then 60 riders took up the challenge. So the first tour officially started on the 1st of July 1903. It was over 19 days, but it was only 6 stages, with the stages being stupidly long, to about 400 kilometres each, about 250 miles, compared to nowadays it's about 170 kilometres, about 100 miles each. They got more rest days in between, but it was literally designed to be grueling and strenuous. Not surprisingly, right from the start, there was accusations of cheating, competitors using motor cars as pacers and drafters. Bikes were sabotaged by opponents, most notably one sabotage made on by an opponent of the eventual winner, a man named Maurice Garin. Maurice Garin's an interesting guy. He was an amateur about 10 years before this, struggling to make any impact on the sport. He tried to enter a professional event, and the guys in charge of the event kicked him out and told him he wasn't allowed to take part. So he ignored them and rode the race anyway, and he ended up winning the race, which obviously they immediately disqualified him, but it made a big enough scene and made a big enough impact on the newspapers that he was able to turn professional. So he got denied his prize money, which is something like 150 francs, but the crowd loved him so much that they gave him about 300 francs, and he used that to buy a new bike. So pretty cool story.
Yeah, that's fun.
But yeah, and then he went on to win the first Tour de France in 1903. However, he did do that by sabotaging one of his opponent's bikes, allegedly.
I love that allegedly, mate, is just a term that was coined in the very first tour.
I mean, he denied it, obviously.
Yeah, or one of his commercial sponsors had a dispute with him and sabotage stitched him up in some conspiracy theory, or he ate some contaminated meat and it punctured his teammate's tire.
The other rider was probably Italian. He was just being emotional. The event, anyway, was a huge success for Lotto. Tripled their circulation. They sold celebratory copies too. It also ensured that the 1904 tour would return, which was very near the last tour, because the 1904 tour is ludicrously controversial. It's worth mentioning just to show that cheating by multiple competitors on a large scale is really nothing new. Began with huge expectations, obviously, but basically descended into an anarchic mess of rule-breaking violence and outrage. Riders have basically resorted to brazen cheating. Some caught trains, others hitched lifts in cars, drafted behind motor vehicles, had their bikes transported separately while they relaxed, tagged in other riders to ride for them. It was just rampant.
Is it weird that you're making me have more respect for the dopers? Because at least they cycled it.
Yeah. I've got more as well. Apparently thumbtacks were thrown on the road in front of people to cause punctures.
That still happens.
Does it really? Wow.
Yeah. There was a scandal not too many tours ago where like someone in the crowd just basically threw a load of tacks in them and it just caused chaos.
Incredible. Basically, none of them were caught because there wasn't enough people trying to catch cheats at the event, and also too many people were doing it. Officials were forced to fire pistols in the air just to stop a mob by the roadside, a scene more like the Wild West than a modern sporting event. In Nimes, fans rioted in protest of their hometown favourite Ferdinand Payan being disqualified for persistent drafting, and also for pelting other riders with rocks during the third stage. Despite the mayhem, Maurice Garin crossed the finish line in Paris as the winner again, having taken stage 1 and the overall classification. However, under enormous pressure and public interest, the French Cycling Federation, the UVF, withheld its final results for 4 months while it investigated all the chaos, and eventually stripped the top 4 finishers, including Garin, of their results, and awarded the race to the guy who came 5th, a man called Henri Cornet, who even to this day remains the youngest winner of the Tour de France at the age of 20, even though he actually came 5th. The Tour founder, Henri Destrange, was so disillusioned by the scandal, he considered ending the race for good, saying that the Tour was killed by its own success, which is an interesting way of putting it. And Garin raged for years what he called a flagrant injustice. He never rode the Tour again. Using the money that he won in the 1903 Tour, he'd opened a petrol station and garage in Lons, and he retired there, deeply embittered by the outcome of the Tour, but still revered in French cycling circles as the first Tour winner until his death, well, beyond his death, 1957 at age 85. Yeah, there's the first Tour, fun. Well, first 2, actually.
Yeah, that is fun, and you're right. It's like, I was wondering how we were going to, if it was even going to be possible for us to link up the scandal of the modern day doping back to World War II with the first Tour, and it's just like, turns out it's just been rife ever since its inception.
I mean, cheating like that was sort of, well, it had to be stamped down on, otherwise the Tour wouldn't have gone on. But there were druggies. A lot of them were all druggies up until, well, I mean,
if anything,
forevermore. But
if anything, the races got cleaner, which I thought I wasn't expecting to learn.
I mean, it's the kind of things they were taking in the early days, like ether, cocaine, strychnine. That's rat poison, by the way, in case anyone doesn't know. And they were just getting pissed all the time as well. They were just drinking constantly to dull the pain. Basically, everything they were taking was to dull the pain of the fact it's an insane event. And it only got worse as well.
Flagrant cheating of like getting trains and drafting behind cars. We keep mentioning that. That's just another illustration of the aerodynamic benefit. You're sitting in the slipstream in another vehicle. It's like 30-40% easier or something. It's pretty wildly easier. Like that's mad.
Nitroglycerin as well.
Nitroglycerin, isn't that very explosive?
It is used. It's still used to this day on, I think, certain heart conditions. It's useful for, but basically, aids breathing. It opens up your blood vessels.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, actually, sorry, it does say on my notes, riders were dosing themselves with chemicals used to treat heart conditions and blow up bridges.
Yeah, I thought nitroglycerin was very, very explosive.
So what happened from there was, that was basically it until the Second World War. And what happened in the Second World War, which you may be aware of...
is France got invaded, so there wasn't a tour.
Well, that happened. Yeah, it wasn't great conditions to carry on the tour for a few years, obviously, but all the armies... I think literally all the armies started giving their soldiers amphetamines in order to improve their battle readiness, make sure they could survive off little sleep and be fired up to, try and stab people with bayonets.
The Blitzkrieg is very famously associated with amphetamines, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if the Germans were the first to do it, but they certainly were dosed up for that. So after the war, obviously, people were aware of what amphetamines did, and they started being used in cycling. This is when the problems started arising, because weirdly, all that crazy stuff we were saying before, it did lead to some health problems, it did lead to even some deaths, but it wasn't particularly widespread. Now, amphetamines are a completely different matter. They raise your heart rate, make it more likely you have heart attacks, make your judgment poorer, make you do things that you wouldn't normally do, ride more aggressively downhill, for example.
Yes.
And as a result of that, there were people who were getting themselves injured and dying. So that's when there started being a campaign from doctors, from race organisers, from journalists to clamp down on it.
I was going to say, mate, I thought I read, and correct me if I've misremembered, because I'm sure you know the detail, that there's a series of incidents, like particularly one incident where a guy had a very serious crash on a descent chasing someone who was leading a stage, and he broke his back.
Yes.
And
I can't remember who it was, but yeah, you're right.
And it's because he claimed it was, there was something, his bike had been sabotaged or something, but then he later conceded it was because he was so high on some sort of amphetamine that his reactions for braking were slower, and he didn't press the brakes. And
there was one other drug as well. And then you carry on.
No, I was going to say, and then there was another incident where I think all of the riders were given a contaminated batch of something on one of the stages.
Morphine.
And they got really sick. And so the point I was getting to is that weirdly, people's discontent with the use of drugs in the sport is not from the basis of cheating. It was from the basis that it was making people poorly and the event poorer.
Yeah, well, it was bringing the event into disrepute. It's very hard to hide from the authorities, from the French authorities or from the press when people are dying. So it was morphine. The other thing I was saying, the other drug was morphine. In 1962, 14 riders were hospitalized, as you say, for taking tainted morphine.
Mad.
Which is mad. Because that dulls your reaction times badly as well. So imagine going downhill with morphine in your system.
Yeah, I mean, I've had morphine post-operation, and it's incredible stuff if you want to relax. But it's not. Yeah. I wouldn't be, if someone was asking me to make split-second decisions whilst hurtling down the mountainside on 2 wheels
at 70 kilometers an hour, yeah,
that were contingent on my reactions to slow down, I would say that that's an inadvisable situation to put someone high on morphine into.
You might be right. Anyway, so in 1963, this was just after that morphine incident, was when the voice was really raised for it. So there was talk about it in the French Parliament, and eventually 1965 saw the French government introduce the first anti-doping legislation in the sport, and testing began in earnest, not because of fairness, but due to public safety and the growing body count, as you say correctly. Cyclists were furious.
Is it criminalised then? Because I know it's criminalised now.
I can only assume with the legislation.
Yeah, so that's probably something that's worth mentioning, because it's not in most places. So it's a crime to dope in France. It's not a crime to dope in the UK or elsewhere. It's sometimes a crime to be in possession of, controlled substances, some of which are, things like steroids, but there is no offence of taking performance-enhancing drugs.
You could make a case for fraud in some cases, especially if you're with sponsors and everything like that, if a lot of money is involved.
No one ever does. But I think it's an actual crime in France.
I think you're right, yeah.
Which is just an interesting dynamic. And is also necessary context for the Festina thing, which we'll get to, but yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, as I say, cyclists were furious. The 1966 Tour, the first year after this, the entire peloton staged a protest led by Jacques Anquetil. They dismounted at the start of stage 9, walked their bikes for 50 metres and chanted, "No pissing in test tubes," which has got a nice ring to it. It might sound better in French, that.
I like that.
The tour's director, Felix Levitan, fumed, calling them a band of drug addicts on wheels.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not inaccurate.
But all this took a really dark turn in 1967, as we well know, and as any fans of cycling in the United Kingdom will know. Tom Simpson.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Tom Simpson was he was born in 1937 in County Durham. He grew up in a coal mining family, moved to the Yorkshire-Nottingham border at age 12. He was an ambitious man. He evaded national service and moved to France in 1959 to chase a career as a professional cyclist with just £100 in his pocket. He turned professional soon after and made some good early results, finished 4th in his first World Championships. He embraced a persona which the French really loved, where essentially he was dubbed Major Tom. He sported bowler hats, cracked jokes, played the English gentleman type with an umbrella under his arm. It's a sort of understanding that self-promotion was part of the job to get himself noticed, get sponsors on his back. In 1961, he became the first Briton to win the Tour of Flanders, which was really impressive. And a year later, he was the first Englishman ever to win the yellow jersey. Only wore it for one stage, but wore the yellow jersey at the Tour de France, which is obviously a big deal.
He's also won, you might be coming to this, mate, but he's won the Tour of Flanders, the Milan-San Marino, and the Giro de Lombardia as well. So like some classics.
And even more than that, in 1965, as a dark horse, he went into the World Championships, leading a ragtag British team that he'd personally assembled and outfitted. He made their made the outfit, well, not made, he obviously ordered in the outfits for them to make sure they were looking as good as the French were. And in torrential rain, against Germany's Rudi Altig, he used subtle mind games and a burst of power to outsprint him and win the rainbow jersey, becoming Britain's first world champion. And it was many, many years before we had another one, which is your man again. Or our man, I love him too. Mark Cavendish, many years later. But yeah, won the world championship. So he's a hell of a rider.
Oh, mate, I just looked it up for you. Like, he also won an Olympic bronze in 56 and a Commonwealth silver in 58.
He was a proper rider.
And he won the Bordeaux-Paris, that mega event that you mentioned earlier.
If you look at what sort of people in the know speak about, I think Bradley Wiggins actually said this. He was like, Tom Simpson couldn't beat me in a time trial. I think that's what Bradley Wiggins said. He couldn't beat Chris Froome to the top of a mountain. He couldn't beat, I can't remember who else it was. Or was it David Miller? He couldn't beat to a top of a mountain, whoever it was. Or he couldn't beat Mark Cavendish in a sprint, of course. But none of us would beat him in the general classification. He was the ultimate all-rounder, which is what you need to be to win the general classification. So, he was 29 years old when he died, just coming into his peak as a cycler. Who knows what might have happened, but then I've got to tell the story of how he died now.
Go ahead.
So, he was ambitious for the 1967 Tour, and he was 7th overall in the rankings before stage 13. Riders climbing the barren slopes of Mont Ventoux near the summit in punishing heat, he began to swerve, collapse, and after insisting for the fans around him, put him back on his bike. He mounted again, only to collapse for one final time. He was airlifted to hospital in Avignon and pronounced dead at 5:40 p.m. The official cause of death was a heart failure from heat exhaustion, but in his jersey pocket, investigators found several boxes of amphetamines. So, I think we can put 2 and 2 together there.
Yeah. It was also in his blood. I think it was in his blood as well when they tested it.
Yeah. So there's a memorial now in the spot that he fell, and the following day, his British teammate Barry Hoban won the stage. Yeah, he won the stage in tribute to Simpson, and funnily enough, later married his widow.
But yeah, no, I mean, like, Yeah, Tom Simpson's case is a sad one, unfortunately. Climbing Von 2 as well, which,
Yeah.
whilst we're here, Mont Ventoux is one of the iconic climbs of the tour. It's disgracefully hard. It's very barren mountaintop, almost like lunar type landscape. Like trees at the bottom, you come through some trees and then it's out into like this rocky surface up to the summit.
Yeah, I was looking at pictures of it. It's very very remote and barren. Quite incredible to look at.
It looks like an observatory. The station at the top looks a bit like an observatory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might even be. I don't know. It's a hors category climb.
Should we explain that now?
Yes, whilst we're here.
Set it up perfectly. Well done. So, do you want to do it or shall I?
You do it. You're the index man.
So, climb categories in the Tour de France are ranked from Category 4, which are the easiest, to hors category, which is beyond categorization, based on a combination of length, gradient, and position in the stage. So the categories were originally, and this is a cool story, they were originally based on what gear a Citroen 2CV could use to climb the mountain. HC, or category, meant that not even a Citroen 2CV could handle it, which is saying a lot because they are just, the peak of French engineering. But nevertheless, that's quite a cool way they were originally categorized.
Yeah.
But nowadays, it's slightly more scientific. Category 4s are short, shallow climbs, often under 2 kilometers. Category 3s are slightly longer or steeper, typically around 2 to 5 kilometers with moderate gradient. Category 2 climbs are steeper or longer still, often around 5 to 10 kilometers and appearing in mid-mountain stages. Category 1 climbs are long, steep ascents, usually over 10 kilometers with significant elevation gain, often high in the mountains. And then you got your HC. HC climbs are the most brutal, exceptionally long, very steep, high altitude, and often decisive mountain stages, such as the Alpe d'Huez.
Mont Ventoux, Alpe d'Huez, Col de Tourmalet.
Yeah, there we go. I'll let you pronounce that one.
There are plenty of others. The Tourmalet is the most visited mountain pass in the Tour. It's in the Pyrenees and it's brutal. But Ventoux savage. Alpe d'Huez is a series of hairpins, very famous for Dutch Corner, where all the Dutch go and have a massive party and are absolutely bloody bonkers.
You've been there, haven't you?
I haven't been to Dutch Corner. I followed the Tour twice in 14 and 18, but I never went to Alpe d'Huez. I think they did visit Alpe d'Huez in 18, but they didn't in 14, if I'm remembering rightly. But I've been on the Tourmalet.
Nice.
Yeah, haven't been to Ventoux either. But
I need to do that sometime.
But yeah, I mean, our man, Mr. Simpson, climbing a brutally steep mountain in incredibly hot conditions whilst taking a shitload of amphetamine.
And brandy.
Forgot
to mention the brandy.
Caused his demise, and there was a consequence to that.
Pierre Dumas was the Tour's chief medical officer, personally became a crusader against doping. Shaken by Simpson's death, he pushed for stronger testing, accountability and reform. But the riders and teams were always A, against it, and B, a step ahead. So whether anything significant changed after that is hard to tell. But the testing over time became a bit more scientifically secure. But unfortunately, the teams had more financial backing and the best doctors in the world, best doping doctors in the world working for them.
Well, it's a perfect storm, isn't it? It's more than that. Like, they did have more financial backing, therefore greater resources to A, source these things, B, find the right doctors and physiotherapists and people that could create a regime that made you less likely to be caught. But you also have the added benefit of the fact that if you're doing well and all the events are interesting, exciting, tense as a direct consequence of all of these people competing with one another, then the sport has a vested interest in not catching you because it is monetizing your success. And the people who are watching it don't want to have their bubble burst, so they would rather bury their head in the sand. And so what you're left with is a couple of people who are underfunded, who are behind on the science, and who nobody really gives a shit about, doing their very best to catch people in a environment where everyone's protecting them.
Yeah, and I think that's the real thing. There's the code of silence within cycling often described as a murder, which is a mafia word for anyone who hasn't heard it. The idea that you just don't talk, you don't snitch. And it's the same in professional cycling, whether you're a soigneur, which is an assistant that helps the cyclists, basically massages, giving them drugs, whatever your particular role is, that's what a soigneur is. Whether you're a soigneur, a team manager, a doctor, a trainer, or a cyclist, you don't talk. And people who have talked, and there have been people who have tried to speak out, but they are quite often ostracized, and sometimes to the point where they are kicked out of the sport, either directly or indirectly, or sometimes driven off the road, literally. One example of that was a guy who, again, we'll come to Festina shortly, but a guy who rode for Festina called Christophe Bassons, who was riding clean, and he was writing a newspaper column about it, questioning the resurgence in performance levels, essentially, after that scandal, particularly Lance Armstrong's at that point, and he was heavily ostracized for it, to the point that Armstrong himself confronted him directly during stage 10 of the 99 race, telling him to leave the sport, asking him why he's even in the peloton still. Basson eventually left the race on stage 12 under pressure from teammates, media, and even his team director, and that was basically him done in the sport.
But this
Incredible.
Is a tale of as old as time in terms of like self-preservation, isn't it? Because they just sue you for defamation because you're one person and you can't substantiate your claims because no one else is supporting you.
You can't afford to, yeah.
They trash your reputation. They maybe even cast aspersions about your character. Maybe accuse you of doping, maybe accuse you of just being rubbish, maybe accuse... In Armstrong's instance, he said some pretty unsavory things about female physiotherapists in the team, didn't he? And like about her reputation.
Yes, yeah, he did. Sonia, yeah, it was Emma O'Reilly. Yeah.
That's it, Emma O'Reilly, right? And so they do things like this, and then the cruel irony of it all is that they then use the narrative they've built to impose upon you a motivation for why you would have made these allegations. So even though your allegations predate all these accusations being made against you, they then turn the tables and suggest that your motivation for making these allegations is because of all these things they've said about you after the fact.
Yeah.
It's very, very sinister.
There's a playbook.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it goes all the way to the top. I mean, we're not going to talk about Lance Armstrong too much in this episode because we're absolutely going to do that at some point in the future. And
everyone knows his story in general terms.
There's plenty of... David Walsh's book is fantastic. Everything he's done is brilliant. There's also, I will highly recommend, where I got a lot of my info today, Cycle of Lies by Juliet McCure, who's a journalist as well, works for, I think, the New York Times. Anyway, regardless, she's a fantastic journalist. That's a really good book. And you can tell it's a good book because Lance Armstrong hates her, which is always a good sign. You can get the information from those books, but we probably will cover it at some point too. But they had opportunities to catch Armstrong that they didn't take because he was making the sport so much money. And it was such a happy story on paper. So the guy who 2 years before had, about 0% body fat, was going through chemotherapy, was told he had, weeks to live, and now he's winning the Tour de France and doing it all naturally, as far as anyone's concerned, on the back of the Festina scandal, which we'll talk about in a second, and this idea that 1999 was a tour of renewal. He failed a test for cortisone
in 1999.
Yeah. And it just got swept under the rug by the UCI.
Yeah. Is that McQuaid?
Maybe, yeah.
I think it is.
That's incredible.
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it? So you have Tom Simpson dying.
Yeah.
No one gives a shit in the sport, at least.
Yeah, well, the next time people really started taking notice was when more people started dying and lots of people started dying. And that was in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and that was because of a new doping wonder drug called...
Yes, pronounce this.
Erythropoietin.
EPO. Yeah, EPO.
You may well have heard of EPO.
Long distance runners take it.
You may not have heard of that thing I tried to say.
It's known as EPO. Long distance runners take it as well.
Yeah, it's
an endurance thing. Does it thicken your blood? Is that the problem?
It boosts your red blood cell capacity, essentially.
But doesn't that causes some complications?
Basically, you take it because you're trying to increase what is known as your hematocrit count. So that basically measures what percentage of your blood is red blood cells. The higher the red blood cells, the better, because obviously red blood cells carry oxygen. A normal person has something like 43% hematocrit levels. A Tour de France cyclist will want to have in the high 40s. There was even one cyclist who famously, was it your man, 96 winner? He was called Mr. 60%.
96 was Bjorn Rees. Let me have a look.
I might be getting him mixed up with someone, but there's someone who was known for having 60% hematocrit level. Probably not natural, shall we say, but what it could also do, EPO increases your red blood cell count. What that does is make your blood thicker. So that makes it more likely that you have a heart attack and more likely that you have a stroke. And what happened in the late 80s and early 90s is particularly Dutch riders, because the Dutch were the first, the first national group to start using this en masse, and a lot of them started dying. One of them was a man called Johannes Dreyer, a Dutch cyclist. He died in 1990, age 26. His widow later claimed that EPO was the cause. Autopsies were inconclusive at the time, but the pattern at that point was becoming impossible to ignore. It was, I think, 14 or something like that. A large number of Dutch riders died at that point. And it changed the sport in many ways. Obviously, the dangers involved, but then the doctors started getting involved and they started doing, some work into it, and certain people became specialised in it, shall we say. One of them being Michel Ferrari, who famously worked with Lance Armstrong. And, I mean, you're talking about in the early 90s, a team like the ones Lance Armstrong was on in early days, a team like Motorola, would have medicine cabinets filled with legitimate treatments and sort of the grey area drugs I was talking about earlier. Cortisone for inflammation, testosterone for recovery, obviously ibuprofen, antiseptics, diarrhea tablets, that kind of thing.
How is testosterone like a marginal one?
It depends on what it's being used for. Obviously, testosterone, if you're using it to build muscle, is a massive, a massive way of cheating. Ben Johnson was disqualified in 1988 for taking that, but for recovery purposes, it just sort of works like, I don't know, a better version of these over-the-counter drugs. Okay. Just to get you back on the bike quicker, which obviously is still cheating.
Sounds like performance enhancing.
It is. It is. It's not quite on the same level as EPO.
But this is the thing. But this is the thing that is a bit of I guess it's nuanced, but it's one of the things that I find really irritating is that if you can recover quicker, people don't associate that with being performance enhancing because it's not enhancing your in-game performance. But if you can recover quicker, that is performance enhancing.
Because you can train more.
Yeah.
And train harder for longer.
And or not be afflicted by injury or whatever. Anyway, digressing, I'm just whinging.
The mantra at the time was pretty obvious. It's not cheating if everyone's doing it. And everyone was doing it. Certainly every team was.
Yeah.
What happened with Armstrong and the US Postal team was they were doing it better than everyone.
And they were nastier.
Yeah, well, that too. More hyper-focused, shall we say. But yeah, I mean, Armstrong wanted to do it better. He wanted to be the best at it. There's crazy stories that we'll talk about one day of them parking the team buses on the corner of mountain passes and all blood doping at the same time. It's crazy stuff. Like the extent to which it was going on, obviously having to squeeze bags of fluids inside themselves before they get blood tested because it would drive their hematocrit level down. So all of a sudden it wouldn't be suspicious levels. It would look normal because you put more liquid into your blood. Having to do that in a panic when the testers knocked on the door. How they got away with it for so long is quite incredible. I mean,
systemic. That's how you get away with it.
The farmers used to bring into newspapers and tell the newspapers and radio stations about how many discarded syringes they were finding by the side of the road as after the tour went past them. It was crazy. And hotel bins as well. They were just throwing it out in the trash at hotels.
Putting it in Coke cans.
Yeah, the thing about EPO is stored in vials, small glass vials, and you have to keep it on ice. So if you look at old cycling clips from the late 90s, they're all carrying around these thermoses, and you can hear them clinking as they're walking along. And it was apparently it was the soundtrack of the tour. And that's one thing that Juliet McCure said. The soundtrack of the tour was this clinking sound, because they were all doing it.
Mad, isn't it?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, should we talk about Festina? Because we've been talking about it for so long.
It's the crescendo of all of this. That's the reason we've been dangling the carrot. Normally we do it because we're dysfunctional and disorganized, but on this occasion it's because it is all building to a crescendo.
It's such a pivotal moment because it should have been the moment that cycling cleaned up its act and became better. And it was literally the year before Lance Armstrong won it. It was an opportunity to make the sport better. Like the next 7 Tour de France's have no winner because Lance Armstrong.
Yeah.
What it was, to put simply, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but in 1998, Willy Vogt, who was a soigneur for the Festina team, he was caught with a car full of EPO, steroids, and human growth hormone. Haven't even mentioned human growth hormone yet.
No, but can we just make clear as well that you weren't being hyperbolic there? He actually was caught with a car full.
A car full. And he was caught by border police as well, so he was trying to cross the border, blew the tour wide open. Festina were immediately disqualified from that year's tour. It revealed doping networks, doctor involvement, team complicity. These, the fact these soigneurs were procuring the drugs for their riders. The soigneurs were somewhere between sort of like masseuses and like aftercare and fixers and bloody drug peddlers as well. It was incredible stuff. Some of them were making a lot of money out of it as well. Obviously, Festina booted from the race. Other teams pulled out in protest. Or were caught up in police raids at that time as well. It turned basically into a slow motion collapse of cycling's credibility all at once. And the same year, the UCI, which is the Union Cycliste International, so basically the governing body of cycling, and the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, began working out formalised testing protocols and out-of-competition checks. The cat was out of the bag by then, and that, as I say, should have been a change of cycling for the better. And then 1999 came along.
It's crazy. There was also like public acknowledgement that the peloton speed was increasing, and it was due to increasing use of doping. It like emerged, as you've already mentioned, about like certain hotels being complicit, and there just being like a full-on network of like anti-doping. Like they properly busted them. Like they raided it and they figured it all out. Weirdly, they didn't convict any riders though. It was all the bloody support staff. I say weirdly. It wasn't weird. I'm being sarcastic. But yeah.
After years of turning a blind eye to it, a team got caught in as I said before, with their pants down. It was unavoidably criminal situation, caught by the police with a boot full of very, very restricted drugs. And from that point forward, there's nothing that could be done. Like, the snowball is rolling, it is gathering momentum, and the police had to obviously go through the motions and do their job. Where they were probably turning a blind eye before, they didn't have that option now. Where the UCI or the governing body were turning a blind eye before, they couldn't now. And as I say, it was an opportunity, but all it did was make it more professional.
10 criminal convictions.
Yeah.
No one actually went to prison, though.
No.
Everyone got a suspended sentence. The scandal to end all scandals, you would have thought.
But then 1999, yeah. So I personally am going to end on 1999. I don't know if you have anything else to say.
No, I might end it on a happier note.
Please do.
Yeah, go on.
So, 1999, we're going to end here and probably pick it up from this point in the future and talk about US Postal Team and Armstrong. But the 99 Tour de France was marketed as the Tour of Renewal. An attempt to turn the page after the 1998 Festina affair almost destroyed the race. The organisers tried to bar certain controversial figures from the race, but then the UCI overruled them. It turned into a bit of a political turf war, which I won't get into really, but for the first time in a long time as well, there was no former Tour winner on the start list. A couple of the former winners, Rees and Ulrich, were injured. Pantani was absent after he was suspended for being caught taking drugs at the Giro. And so, early on, a certain Lance Armstrong emerged as a surprise favourite. There's a Swiss rider called Alex Zülle, formerly of the disgraced Festina team. He crashed on the Passage du Gois. A team director told his riders to attack him in revenge for his whistleblowing the year before during the Festina scandal. So basically, he was forced off his bike at that point. I've already told you about Christophe Basson's getting forced out the Tour and obviously Armstrong essentially threatening him. But the main point about all this was, after so much talk about the speeds increasing year on year on year on year, all the way up to 1998, the race directors came out and said they would be delighted if it was slower this year. They were saying they'd be fine if it was 3 kilometers an hour slower than the year before. From the beginning, the average speed was higher than it had ever been before, 44 kilometers an hour in week 1, and then Armstrong did a time trial in Metz where he was 49.5 kilometers per hour, which absolutely stunned onlookers and obviously got chins wagging as well. I think that might have been, I don't know if this is something that's been sort of captured in film more than it is in fact, but that was a moment that's often cited as like David Walsh sort of opening his eyes to the situation, like that's impossible.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
I think
he must be cheating.
He said something about on one of the climbs, like Armstrong didn't like look like he was sweating.
There was people who saw through it from the beginning, but the authorities were not prepared to do so. The one rider, Ludo Dirksons, I think it is, won stage 11, then accidentally confessed to corticoid use for a knee injury without proper documentation. He was ejected by his own team immediately, likely as a scapegoat to preserve their image. And as we mentioned, a positive test for corticoids came back for Armstrong after stage 1. He avoided sanction by producing a backdated prescription for a skin cream, which the UCI quietly accepted, breaching its own anti-doping protocols. There we go.
Yeah, it's a romantic story.
Yeah, there was also tear gas sprayed by spectators at one point.
The spectators sometimes throw piss in people's faces.
Oh, and he ran a later time trial even faster, over 50 kilometres an hour in a later than, and the Tour finished with an all-time highest average speed of over 40 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, it got quicker, straight after the greatest doping scandal of all time.
Yeah, there's some sarcastic roadside banners like "Long live EPO" and "Armstrong at home, Bassons in the peloton."
Yeah.
Long live EPO.
It's a very, very romantic story. It's why we fall in love with sport. This sort of thing.
But that's the thing. That's the thing, though. It was like, if you take all this out of it, if you turn off your brain, or
if it was real,
if you're new to the sport, or if it was real, it's incredible stuff. But it wasn't real.
But it wasn't real.
It wasn't real.
Yeah, that's the problem, mate. I, as you were talking about that, I've made me sort of start wondering, like, why do we like it then?
Why do we like it?
And I think, do you know why I think we like it? Well, I have a theory. I think it's because it's probably the one event, as annoying as it is, and as idealistic as we are, as in me and you, it's probably the one event where you at least know what you're letting yourself in for. There's less smoke and mirrors. Like, yeah, sure, they're all lying to us, and that's fine. But like, I know they're lying to me, and so I watch it for the fact that it's still grueling, it's still hard, it's still tactical, and it is probably clearing up its act slightly.
Well, I mean, the biological passport. I mean, you have to work off faith a little bit that what the authorities are telling you is true, but it's a very good idea from a scientific point of view, and hopefully it is genuinely making a difference, as they say it is.
Yeah, that's what you can only hope. But
for those of you who don't know, that is, instead of taking a doping test and finding substances present in your system, they track your certain measurements basically within you, such as your hematocrit levels, such as your VO2 max, that kind of thing, which is your essentially oxygen capacity. Things like that, they track them, and if they see alternations in them over time, and they can obviously come and test you at any point, it indicates you're doping in that case.
They're tracking you against you.
Yes, which makes it very difficult to get away with it.
Yeah, so if there's a big spike, I think the science behind it is still very complicated and perhaps not conclusive, but it is at least gives a fairly clear indicator.
Yeah.
In extreme examples that somebody is returning results that are not consistent with their normal levels.
Yeah.
As in their personal normal levels. But yeah, doping, man. We could do that for hours. How do I end this on a happy note? How do I transition it? I was only going to say, this year's edition, the route is out. It's all ready to go. It's all ready to rock and roll. Obviously, it's all out. It is going over Von 2.
Nice.
There is a mountaintop finish in Von 2 this year, stage 16. And I think it's stage 14 is going over the Tourmalet.
Awesome.
So two mega climbs. I don't think Alpe d'Huez is in it this year. Obviously, there's a multitude of different locations, towns, cities that the tour goes through. This is starting very north and then heading down the west coast into the Pyrenees, a little bit along the bottom of France. So actually, they're skipping from Carcassonne and then riding up the west.
It is a massive honour for these small towns when the tour goes through your town.
Oh, big deal.
Genuinely, like, the entire town's out. All towns from around it, not on the route, will come into your town. They'll sell our bread in the bakery. That's how serious it is.
Yeah, it's a very, very big deal. Brings a lot of money, like these things tend to. Big crowds, etc. There have been 5 places, Jack, that have hosted stages of the tour more than any other. You want to have a guess at a few?
Paris.
Yeah, I was going to say if you don't get one.
Nice.
Paris is 148. Nice, great shout, 5th place. Very well played.
It's just pretty. It's on the coast.
Yeah.
I'm guessing other big cities. Marseille.
No, but you're getting warm. Come on. There's a very nice town you're overlooking here. You've already mentioned it. Mentioned it in one of the major races that no longer exists.
Bordeaux.
Yes, Bordeaux is second, 81. The other two that I don't think you'll get are Pau with 77 in third, which is near the Pyrenees.
Yes.
And Bagnes de Longchamp, which is in the Pyrenees as well.
Even if I knew that, I wouldn't have tried to pronounce it. So
yeah, but yeah, that's fun, isn't it? Do you want to know who the best dopers are in the world?
Go for it.
So the French, I mean, despite all their protestations and their criminality of it, they have had 716 stage wins, more than anybody else, quite significantly more than anybody else. The Belgians, the Flemish, in second on 494. France have also had the most winners, 36 wins from 21 different riders.
Be embarrassing if they hadn't.
Belgium 18 from 10. Yeah, and then you got all your usual suspects, really, all your big cycling European nations,
Netherlands,
Italy, Netherlands, Spain, Germany, us, 78, Luxembourg, Switzerland, and a little outsider, Australia, at 39.
Yeah, fair enough. That's stage wins.
So
we got 78, did you say?
78 for yours truly.
So Cav's nearly half of them.
Yes, indeed, he is.
Solid.
And Froome will have quite a few. And then you'll have a couple of people like, I presume David Miller might have won one.
I think he has, yeah.
Tom Simpson. Who else might there be? Oh, the Yateses might have done. Tom Piddock might have won a couple. Tom Piddock's a legend.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. And then in terms of overall wins, it's a pretty similar order, actually. France, Belgium, Spain, Italy. We're in 5th now. We're 6 from 3.
All right.
I mean, considering we were nowhere, gone straight into 5th in the last 15 years. Yeah, the US are now 7th, but they would have been joint 4th, but for, a couple of indiscretions.
Yes.
Ireland, Germany, Australia, Colombia all have one as well. One winner
yes.
in their history, so that's fun. Yeah, I don't know. If we've not put you off it, if you're still engaged.
What I'd recommend as a sort of way to ease yourself in is find the early stages. There tends to be a couple of bunch finish, sprint finishes. Find one of them and watch the end of it. Because there's nothing like either a sprint finish or a breakaway finish towards the end. High excitement.
That's a nice way to explain it, mate. That's why we like it. There's a suspense to it. There's a lot of inertia, and then it goes mad.
Weirdly, I talked about this in the Indianapolis 500 episode. Speaking about the Indy, of the same idea. It builds the suspense more and more as they get closer to the finish. They get into the last 20 kilometers, the last 10 kilometers. You're building yourself up. You're thinking, are they going to catch that breakaway group? Are they going to pull them back into the peloton for a bunch finish? Or is this breakaway group going to be able to see it out of the breakaway group? Who's going to then sprint to the finish? Or is one of them going to go for another break? Or are they going to get dragged back in? Is someone going to go too early, too late? It's fun.
It is fun, and like mountaintop finishes, like who's going to break, as in like who's actually going to break down, who's going to get driven into the deck. Yeah, sprint finishes are really tense because is there going to be a crash? Can you get your positioning right? Is your lead out man in the right position? It is great. It is good.
A single sprint finish is not going to decide the race, but a single mountaintop finish can. So that would be once you've watched the sprint finish, get yourself to one of these HC finishes.
CC, the Giro d'Italia.
Yeah, get yourself on one of them.
No, that's absolutely spot on. That's how Yates won the Giro.
Yeah.
He overturned a massive deficit on one mountain climb. But yeah, so look, we're cynics when it comes to the purity of cycling, but it doesn't stop us watching it.
No, and you've got to suspend your disbelief a little bit while you're watching it. If you go into it with a cynical mindset, you'll think everyone's on it, and you might be right.
But also you might be wrong.
Suspend your disbelief a little bit. You might, maybe not anymore. Fingers crossed.
And you probably should give people the benefit of the doubt, because they'll let you down often enough.
Yeah.
And on that cheery note.
God, I love Bradley Wiggins. Loved, I don't know.
Well, I still love Cav.
Oh, I still love Cav.
There ain't nothing that's going to take that away from me. So I still like Wiggins. Wiggins is a rock star.
He's a flawed genius.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, should we leave it there?
Yeah, I think we've done a decent job there. Bit of ranting, but we know we're good at that.
We know by now that you'll tell me off for trying to summarise exactly where you can watch it because Google is our friend.
Or you can ask Jeeves.
But it's Eurosport. ITV in the UK as well. And where are we going next?
Next is a good one because it's a competition that England are defending. It is the Women's European Championships football that we're going to.
Nice.
Which is cool.
Yeah. Are we going all the way?
Well, who knows? England are the reigning champions there and the runners-up at the last World Cup, so probably the favourites or thereabouts.
Spain will be the favourite.
Oh, I forgot about Spain, yeah.
Spain are very good. But we will be competitive.
Arsenal just won the Champions League.
Exactly. Never say never. It's football. Anything can happen. We're back in the wheelhouse. We're feeling good. We're ready to go. And yeah, we'll do that next week.
Awesome. Well, au revoir.
Au revoir. Adama?
I don't know what that means.
See you tomorrow, I think.
Okay.
All right. See you later.
See you, mate. Bye. Once again, thank you for tuning into the Sporting Almanac podcast. If you enjoyed it and we haven't ruined any love for cycling you hope to have, then give us a like, a subscribe, a rate or a comment, but please tell your friends too and spread the word. Our theme tune is Oh Yeah by Harmonia Productions. You can find us on Instagram and Blue Sky at The Sporting Almanac, or drop us an email at thesportingalmanacpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to know more about cycling, anything by David Walsh or Julie McCure is a good place to start. Next up, it's the Women's European Championships in Switzerland. Until then, stay curious. Whether good or bad, fair or foul, sport is nothing without the history that makes it. Goodbye.